Writing a sequel to the series has to be hard. There's this fine balance that needs to be struck. You want to carry over characters, arcs, and themes from the original so that the fans you amassed in the first place have enough reason to come back, while also creating enough new material that the story doesn't feel stagnant. Make too many changes and you piss off the existing fans.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Chicks dig the car.
This is why Superman works alone.
Make too few and you end up making the exact same movie and potentially boring audiences. Then again, that second option maybe isn't too bad. I mean, Star Wars has made the same movie 3 times and fans keep coming back for more. Yeah, I went there. Fight me, nerds. The point being, when creating a sequel, especially to an already complete series, there's an inherent risk involved. Some series take the status quo and just shake it up, like how the T-800 from Terminator 1 returns as a good guy in Terminator 2.
Same make. Same model. New mission. His loyalty is to a child.
Who sent you?
You did.
While others will pretty much throw out any familiarity at all and take a more reboot approach, like Mad Max Fury Road.
In this wasteland, I am the one who runs from both the living and the dead.
I've talked before about how Batman Beyond is perhaps not the most commercially successful series, largely because of the extremely cynical approach it took to the character of Bruce Wayne, which alienated a lot of classic Batman fans. As for myself, well, to let you in on a secret, the reason why I probably like Batman Beyond so much is because, I don't actually care about Batman. Wow, I am just bound and determined to lose any follower base I may have built today, huh? Well, I mean, I like the 2 Tim Burton movies, but outside of that, Batman has never really been my thing. Superheroes fascinate me from a sociological perspective, but whenever I've sat down to actually read a superhero comic, I get bored and then I get frustrated. Bored because I struggle to connect to these godlike beings, frustrated because of all the prerequisite background knowledge needed to make sense of plot lines. Now, while I don't like Batman, I love Batman Beyond, if it wasn't obvious already. Part of my love for the series is due to Terry, who is in many ways the polar opposite of Bruce, the ultra-rich, ultra-smart, ultra-strong, unreliable ubermensch.
Batman's trying to stop crime, and Terry is trying to make people's lives better.
But that's a topic for another video. The other reason I love Batman Beyond, the reason we're here to talk about today, is how the showrunners behind the series approached their sequel. I'll let them explain.
We wanted to avoid that easy trap of just having, Poison Ivy Beyond and Two-Face Beyond and, we wanted to have all new villains. And
the beauty of Batman Beyond was that for a Batman series, you really only needed a passing knowledge of Batman to be able to enjoy it. Sure, I watched some of Batman the Animated Series / the new Batman Adventures as a kid, but I was 8 years old when the series ended. It's not like I remember that much about it. But I knew the basics of Batman due to pop culture osmosis.
One shot, 2 shots in the night and they're gone, and he's all left alone. He's just one boy, 2 dead at his feet, and the blood stains the street.
And that was all I needed, because, again, in the words of the people who wrote the show,
I wanted to keep this Terry story and not
that was something
another
that's
Bruce Wayne story.
Right. Sure. That's always been the trick with this series. In fact, that was something that we grappled with during the TV series as well.
Batman Beyond had a pretty basic principle that served it well. Don't recycle what's already been done. Don't focus on Bruce Wayne. It's as fresh a start as Batman could get. Instead of an endless cycle of reboots that always tread the exact same ground, Batman Beyond actually took the concept of Batman and made it something new. New setting, new Batman, new villains. It's what made the series work so well and what drew me in both as a kid who didn't read comics and now as an adult who doesn't care about comics. You don't need to know 78 years worth of story arcs, sidekicks, spin-offs, resets, reboots, and retcons to enjoy the story, unlike the comics. In order to understand my anger in this video, you need to understand just how ride or die I am for Batman Beyond. Starting about 2008, I got into the series hardcore, and it has been an obsession that has gripped me for nearly a decade with no signs of letting go. as evidenced by the fact that I've spent the better part of a year analyzing the series. So when I heard in 2009 that there was going to be an ongoing Batman Beyond comic series coming out, I was ready to finally read some frickin' comics. I even tried to read some existing stuff as I waited, mostly Green Lantern and Flash stuff, which relied heavily on having a ton of past knowledge about the characters. The Rebirth series and Blackest Night both had a problem of the writer clearly wanting to return to the status quo of what comics were when he was a kid, which didn't sit well with me. But that was fine, because I was really only waiting for Batman Beyond. Then, in 2010, the comics finally came out. And, well...
No, I don't know what I expected.
Yeah, they weren't good. So, let's talk about why that is. As far as I care, there are 3 big crimes with the 2010 miniseries titled Hush Beyond. All 3 point to a fundamental misunderstanding of Batman Beyond as a concept. Now, I could break the comic down issue by issue, panel by panel, and nitpick every single thing wrong with every page. And trust me, I want to. But if I did, we'd be here all day. So instead, let's focus on one crime at a time. Crime 1, the old rogues! One of the core tenets of Batman Beyond was that the show would not rely on legacy rogues. You know, characters that passed down their title from generation to generation, like the Flash. Within the Batman Beyond cartoon, there were few appearances of old rogues and legacy rogues, but they were few and far between, and tended to advance Terry's character development more than Bruce's.
It could have been worse. He could have blown up the whole compound like he intended, killed hundreds.
Guess you were right about Freeze all along?
We both were.
Oddly enough, I have actually read 2 classic Batman comics in my life. One was The Dark Knight Returns, and the other was Hush. So when I turned the page and saw the reference to Hush in the miniseries, I actually groaned, like out loud. This was literally Hush Beyond. Seriously, I thought, our first foray into Batman Beyond comics, and we're already recycling an old rogue? But then it got worse. Because, as with the original Hush, this new Hush was targeting Batman's rogues. Not Terry's. No, he had to target Bruce's rogues. In rapid succession, we see Hush target a bunch of C-listers such as Signal Man, the Mad Hatter, and Calendar Man. Meanwhile, only one of Terry's recurring rogues, Spellbinder, is seen in the comic and only for a brief few pages. We find out that Hush Beyond has killed Armory, Stalker, and Shriek, with 2 of these deaths not even deemed important enough to be shown on panel. The issue with Hush, and the issue with focusing on Bruce's rogues first, is that it shows a problem that permeates the miniseries. There's an unwillingness to break away from tried and true stories. A bunch of C-listers and recycled rogues are given more importance in the story than the heavy hitters from the cartoon. And the cartoon rogues that are mentioned are given lazy, disrespectful deaths that remove them from the future stories. It leaves the impression that Adam Beechin, the writer of the series, either did not know enough about Batman Beyond, or is too afraid to try to write for Batman Beyond that he would rather tell a Bruce as Batman story than a Terry as Batman story, and force future writers into doing the same with the changes he made. Which brings us to crime number 2. Crime 2! The Bat Wraiths! In Season 1, Episode 11 of Batman Beyond, Disappearing Ink, we see that Bruce has a mechanical exoskeleton bat suit. In issue 3 of Hush Beyond, Terry discovers that Bruce has been building a small army of Mecha Batman dubbed the Bat Wraiths. In Disappearing Ink, Bruce uses the exoskeleton to take up the mantle of Batman one more time. In Hush Beyond, Bruce uses the Bat Wraiths to patrol the streets of Gotham. So, what's the difference between the 2 concepts? Well, it's all in the intent. In the show, Bruce does not want to immediately gear up and get back on the streets. The exoskeleton is old, something Bruce presumably built around the same time that he built the Beyond suit. It put too much strain on his heart. The point is, Bruce built the exoskeleton for himself and never used it. He shows no interest in getting back out and being Batman. In the comics, Bruce deliberately states that he has built the Bat Race out of a lack of faith and trust in Terry. Already we start to see the issues in characterization. While cartoon Bruce is not fully open with Terry, he at least isn't trying to replace him. Comics Bruce, on the other hand, doesn't trust Terry at all. But the really big problem comes with how the exoskeleton is used versus how the Bat Race are used. The exoskeleton comes into use only when Terry is in extreme danger. It's not that he doesn't believe in Terry's abilities, it's that he doesn't want Terry to die. Meanwhile, in the comics, Bruce insults Terry and implies he isn't worthy of being Batman. Now, there are times when Bruce does try to get Terry to stop being Batman. For instance, in Season 2, Episode 12, the villain Shriek holds the city hostage in return for Batman's life. Bruce urges Terry not to go to him, telling that he's done enough for the city.
I wouldn't blame you if you stayed home. Not after what all those ingrates have been saying.
I didn't get into this for gratitude. I have a feeling you didn't either.
He essentially asked Terry to hang up the cape, but only because Terry would get hurt otherwise. Likewise, in the film Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, Bruce tells Terry to hang up the cape, insisting that he's more than repaid his debts to society and avenge his father.
I want you to give back the Batman suit.
What? Why?
There is no reason for you to continue. You've made your father's killers pay for his murder, then put your own needs aside to help the city when it most needed a hero.
Again, he's doing this so that Terry won't have to fight the Joker. He is looking out for Terry's safety. And more importantly, in both of these scenes, Bruce is implying that the city doesn't need Batman. It's important character development, some of the best of the series, which is why this little subplot from Hush Beyond makes me so angry. The miniseries explicitly takes place after the return of the Joker. Literally in the same issue as we are shown the Bat Race, Terry goes and talks to Tim Drake. So this takes place after Terry has proven himself capable of taking down the Joker just by talking.
Real Batman never talked to you much, did he? That's probably why you were so fixated on him.
Don't play psychoanalyst with me, boy!
Oh, I don't need a degree to figure you out.
He achieves something that Bruce could never hope to do. He proves himself to be a worthy successor to the Batman mantle, not just a
Bat fake, bat fake, bat fake.
To write Bruce as ultra-paranoid and distrusting of Terry, like he literally says in the comics that Terry has done nothing for him, is a fart in the face of that character development. Not to mention, it's wrong. Bruce says in the comics that he'll never be happy as long as crime exists. Except he was the one who hung up the cape for 18 years. He is the one who refused to do anything about Derek Powers selling nerve gas to third world dictators. In Terry's own words,
Hey, I was the one who broke in and swiped the suit, remember?
Yes. The show's Bruce is worried about Terry's safety. The comics Bruce is worried about Batman's legacy. Not only are they two entirely different characters, but the Bat Race subplot, much like the reliance on the old rogues, reveals the big issue with this miniseries. The writer was not content letting this be Terry's story. Bruce's insistence that Terry isn't worthy of being Batman reveals Adam Beechan's own bias, whether he realized it or not. He himself obviously is not happy with Terry being Batman. He cannot accept a story where Bruce trusts someone enough to let them be Batman. He cannot write a story that is not classic Batman. Which brings us to the third crime of the miniseries. Crime 3, freaking Catwoman Beyond! Catwoman Beyond is, in my opinion, a distillation of everything that is wrong with the Hush Beyond miniseries. First off, this is literally Catwoman Beyond, something that the writers of the show explicitly did not want. Second, she is blood related to one of Bruce's old rogues, something that happens over and over and over in this comic. In an effort to make the world feel bigger by giving old characters families, it actually makes the world feel smaller by implying that there are only a few people who will ever actually get to be involved in these stories. And finally, there's how Terry reacts to her. Terry actually says, in this comic, that he's always wanted a Catwoman of his own. Ugh. Except he hasn't. Not once in the series did he ever express a desire for his own Catwoman. In fact, Selina Kyle was only ever mentioned once in the series, at the end of Season 1, Episode 8's Dead Man's Hand, in a throwaway line at the end of the episode. And the nature of that line just makes it even more obvious that Terry would not actually want his own Catwoman. Because he already has one. Her name is Melanie Walker, aka 10, and she broke his heart. He already has a complicated semi-romantic relationship with a rogue that he desperately wants to reform, but who can never clean up her act to his standards.
Don't do it. Just go.
suppose I could convince you to let me go.
Selena Kyle is mentioned in the context of Bruce warning Terry not to get involved with Melanie any further.
This kind of thing ever happened to you?
Let me tell you about a woman named Selena Kyle.
The problem with Terry saying he wants his own Catwoman is that it's not Terry saying that. It's Adam saying that. It's Adam pretty much admitting that he cannot conceive of a Batman who does not have a Catwoman. It is him admitting that comics are frustratingly cyclical and resistant to change. Not to mention the blatant objectification of Catwoman all throughout the comic. I don't know if it was on Adam's part or if it was a decision solely on the part of Ryan Benjamin, the artist, but she's put in sexualized and Escher girl poses and called a cougar in her first appearance. And that's just sad. Now, before we conclude, there's actually one other really big problem with this miniseries, and it doesn't really fit with the previous 3 sections, but it still needs to be talked about. And that's the Tate family. Jim Tate was a one-shot villain in the show who went by Armory. Unlike most of Terry's rogues, though, he actually got a happy ending. He had been pushed into crime in order to provide for his family, but willingly gave it up and served his time in prison. His stepson, Jared, was one of Terry's friends from school, appearing in not 1, but 2 episodes. Jim, his wife, and his son are all killed by Hush in issue 2. They get 3 panels worth of screen time, and one of those panels is made up of their bloody corpses. Fucking Calendar Man gets more screen time. If you haven't noticed already, the Tate family is black. Jared is one of only 2 named black students at Terry's school, the other being Max, of course. Jim was one of the only rogues to reform over the course of the series, and they're killed off in 3 panels. Their bloody bodies are on display in one of those panels, whereas all the rest of Hush's villains are covered or off-screen. And what's worse, Jared is aged down, so we get to see the body of a dead black child. A child, who Terry has no emotional response to, even though that character was his friend from school in the show. How many times have we had to see the dead, bloody bodies of black boys in real life? Why did the team behind this comic feel the need to murder one of the only 2 named black families in Batman Beyond? I hate the use of Bruce's rogues, I hate the Bat Race, and I hate Catwoman Beyond, but this unceremonious, unnecessarily brutal treatment of the Tates is really what pushes this series over the edge for me. Black characters deserve better than this. So what makes my complaints here more valid than any other fans whining about how a sequel totally ruined their favorite series? Well, I don't hate all of the Batman Beyond comics. Once the ongoing comics started, things got better. The Death of Shriek was completely ignored, Justice League Beyond has a really fun romp, Terry finally reveals his secret to Dana, something I'd been wishing for years. But I hate what Hush Beyond stands for, because it changes what Batman Beyond stood for. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about when talking about sequels and reboots. In a weird, recursive way, this sequel to a sequel reveals why it's important to pay attention to what the original series was trying to do, what its internal rules were, what the major themes were, especially when talking about comics. Earlier in this video, I said that a big part of what kept me out of comics was that you needed to know so much history in order to fully enjoy them. Batman Beyond was so good because you didn't need that. It was good because it was a new story with new villains. It wasn't like all the superhero movie reboots we keep seeing, where we are fated to watch a slightly modified version of the same origin story every 5 years for the rest of our lives. I think that one of the biggest issues with comics is that comic writers are afraid to tell new stories, or they're just too unimaginative. They want to keep repeating the same stories that they grew up with over and over, caught in this nostalgia feedback loop with only a handful of characters and resistance to change. Batman Beyond, whether you liked it or not, changed Batman. Hush Beyond brought it all right back to the status quo. In the end, there's just something disappointing about that. And that is why I dislike Hush Beyond. Can you believe that this video was actually supposed to be a short video? Well, it turns out when I get talking about something I don't like, I can go on for a while. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you also to the random Tumblr user who just happened to reblog my review of Disappearing Ink and made me realize that I completely missed something and had to rewrite a whole section of this video, therefore delaying it by another week. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.